Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's Saturday, Week 15. Time for the injury report, all of the player news to get you ready for this matchup. It's the fantasy playoffs we need to win, and we're going to break down every single game and all of the key players on the injury report, both on offense, the O-line, and on defense. Let's start with the Arizona Cardinals, who are hosting the Patriots, and Emari Demercado is the only offensive relevant player who is out. So while he's not a household name, you may not expect this. He is getting about 4 or so touches per game. Maybe Trey Benson does have some value, a safer floor with no Demercado, but otherwise no key injuries in Arizona other than Demercado. In New England, the only player out on offense would be Javon Baker. That's pretty irrelevant, but cornerback Christian Gonzalez is questionable with a shoulder injury, and if he is ruled out by kickoff, then perhaps Marvin Harrison Jr. does get a tiebreaker if you're deciding to start him at flex. I think Gonzalez, though, will suit up. In Baltimore, Deontay Johnson was suspended, but he wasn't getting any volume in the first place. The reason he was suspended is that he refused to step on the field. So in fantasy, this is irrelevant, but cornerback Arthur Maulet and TJ Tampa both on IR at the moment. In the Giants offense, Drew Lock is not going to play. He's doubtful. So Tommy DeVito will get the start, and that's a downgrade to the entire Giants offense, in my opinion. I think Lock is a bit more competitive than DeVito is. So that's not good news, but left guard John Runyon is also out. Maybe Tyrone Tracy is not that efficient without the offensive lineman. There's also 14 defensive players that are out or on IR for the Giants. Their defense is completely banged up. Cornerback Deonte Banks is also questionable. Maybe Zay Flowers is safer than I gave him credit for. I did upgrade him in the rankings. Perhaps Rashad Bateman also benefits as well. But in Buffalo, Keon Coleman has been ruled active. He's missed the last couple games, and it's good to have him back on the field. But that does limit the volume headed for Amari Cooper and Khalil Shakir, who are both heavily targeted last week, very good in fantasy. They will see fewer targets this week, along with Dalton Kincaid probably going to play. He was full in both Wednesday and Thursday practice, while he was limited Friday. I think they're just being cautious. Kincaid, I do expect to play. He's missed the last 3 games with a knee injury, and Dawson Knox is no longer viable as a streaming option. But Kincaid is not the safest play. Rarely do we know where the touchdowns are actually going to go. In Buffalo, Kincaid has not scored many this season. So I'm not trying to start Kincaid, but in general, it's kind of just a downgrade to all of the Bills pass catchers. There's fewer targets available compared to last week. If Mac Hollins vultures them for another touchdown, that would suck. But their defense is very banged up. I'm concerned about the Bills' defense. Cornerback Rasul Douglas, who they traded for last year, he's out for this game. Linebacker Bale Inspector, questionable as well. And then 2 safeties are also questionable, not 100%. DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp are both questionable as well. So 4 very important players, along with some injuries they've already had. And I think I would upgrade Jared Goff in the passing game, given these injuries to Buffalo. But speaking of the Lions, their left tackle Taylor Decker is active. He missed last week, and otherwise their entire offense is healthy. So I do trust their offense. They will exploit those Bills injuries on defense, but obviously the Bills offense is going to give them a tough shot. The Detroit Lions have a total of 13 players on defense, either out or on IR, and that includes 6 defensive linemen, 5 linebackers, 1 cornerback, and 1 safety. The Lions, we all know, are very banged up on defense, but their offense is fine. I would be starting just about any Lion that I could this week. In Carolina, Jonathan Brooks was placed on IR last week. Linebacker Jadeveon Clowney is questionable, and cornerback J.C. Horn also questionable, but is expected to play. Clowney, more of a game-time decision. But their opponent, Dallas, is going to be without their linebacker Overshone. He was placed on IR. He got hurt last week, and that's pretty unfortunate, along with cornerback Trayvon Diggs. He's also been placed on season-ending IR. Safety Juwanye Thomas is also out, along with linebackers Eric Kendricks and Nick Vigil. Both of them are questionable. But on the offensive line, guard Cooper Beebe is out, and other than Dak Prescott, there are no relevant injuries on the offense in fantasy. In Cincinnati, left tackle Orlando Brown is out. Left guard Cody Ford is questionable, and 2 of their other offensive linemen are already on IR. So the offensive line is actually very, very injured in Cincinnati. Their entire left side is dealing with like second and third stringers at the best. So I do not trust their run game as much, but obviously Chase Brown is more of a pass catcher in the first place. So in general, perhaps it just leads to a few more sacks on Joe Burrow. But defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins is also out, and that bad defense in Cincinnati going to be even worse against the Titans this week. The Titans are maybe going to be without Tony Pollard. Probably not. He was questionable last week and played as well. With an ankle injury, it's the same practice reps this week. He did not practice Wednesday or Thursday, but then on Friday, he was upgraded to limited. So he's a veteran. He had a leg injury a couple years ago, and I think they're just being a bit safe with him at this point in the season. I do expect Pollard to play. Tyjae Spears would get an upgrade if Pollard doesn't play. He's a game time decision. I expect him to suit up, but if he doesn't, maybe Tyjae Spears has a good day. There's also 4 offensive linemen on IR. The Titans have dealt with a lot of injuries this season, but then there's also a safety and a cornerback, 2 key pieces on IR, but have been missing all season. Their secondary is actually very good despite not having them on the field. In Cleveland, Cedric Tillman is out again, missing his 2nd straight game with a concussion, and the last time we saw him was a Thursday game. It's been over 2 weeks that Tillman hasn't played with that concussion. But David Njoku, probably the more impactful player in fantasy, is questionable with a hamstring injury, and I do not expect him to play. He's a game time decision. If he does, I think he's a must start because he's going to get a ton of volume once again, but he didn't practice all week, and I wouldn't feel great about it. Obviously, you need a backup plan with Njoku. He's a game time decision. It's an early game, thankfully, but if he does play, I think you have to start him. If he doesn't, obviously, you need a backup. So do have someone on your bench in case Njoku can't play. But I think in general, with no Tillman, and especially if Njoku doesn't play either, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore are bolstered, very safe floors in your lineup. Maybe Jordan Akins, who will get all the snaps at tight end, is also interesting. Maybe that's the backup you'll pivot to if you're super desperate on the wire. But I think you can get a better option than Jordan Akins. Perhaps Michael Woods, though, does also have some value. I doubt I'd trust him. I'd only be starting Jeudy and considering Elijah Moore as a flex in Cleveland. But left guard Joel Bitonio is questionable as well. Cornerback Greg Newsome has been placed on IR, and defensive tackle Mike Hall Jr. is expected to return. He's been activated off of IR. So they are getting a bit healthier, but in the secondary, not the case. Newsome is an important player. The Chiefs, though, are getting healthier themselves. Kicker Harrison Butker off of IR. He is active. They did release Matthew Wright. So Butker will get the start, and wide receiver Marquise Brown, while he won't play, probably not until the playoffs, his 21-day practice window was open. So he could return as early as week 18, but I don't think they're going to push it. I expect them to get the 1 seed in the bye, so I doubt we see Hollywood until the divisional round, but still, that's really good news long-term for the Chiefs offense in the playoffs. Hollywood Brown has begun to practice, but left tackle DJ Humphries is ruled out. They just got him back last week, and already he is not ready to play, and that's not good news. But in general, I don't think it really matters that much. Let's move on to the Denver Colts game. Let's move on to the Broncos-Colts game, where the Broncos did cut wide receiver Josh Reynolds. He's not on the team anymore, so if you were trusting Devon Villay, there's not another target to compete with him. So Josh Reynolds is now a Jaguar. We'll get to him in a little bit, but in general, the only key injury to speak of would be cornerback Riley Moss on the defense. He's out. We saw him missing in that Browns game, and Jameis Winston torched that defense when Levi Wallace was on the field. So whoever's not lined up against Patrick Surtain is going to have a very good day, and I think that means Josh Downs gets a big upgrade, along with perhaps Alec Pierce, because Ashton Doolin, a player that sometimes gets targeted deep down the field, is out, and Josh Downs is expected to play. He was limited Wednesday, but full both Thursday and Friday. He missed before their bye week with a shoulder injury. I do think Downs will suit up, but Downs plays in the slot, and Pittman is most likely going to get the Surtain shadow coverage. So I expect Alec Pierce to get open against Levi Wallace. I do think they will take their shots and perhaps target both Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell at a higher rate. We know Richardson has a cannon, so I could see a massive game for one of those players. I trust Downs a lot, but I would be interested to take a flyer on Pierce, given that Riley Moss is out and Levi Wallace will be tested. But right tackle Braden Smith is also out. Otherwise, the Colts are very healthy across the board, with the exception of Mo Cox. Actually, he's questionable, did not practice Friday, and I don't think I trust Kylan Granson or Drew Ogletree, who will get the start in his place. The Texans and Dolphins game, though, there are no relevant players on offense for the Texans that are missing. So if you're planning to start any of them, go ahead. But their center Juice Scruggs was ruled out. Their safety Jalen Petrie placed on IR, and they do have a linebacker expected to return off of IR, and then another linebacker questionable. A guard is also questionable for the Texans. So nothing in fantasy, but otherwise some key players are missing. Miami is going to get Raheem Mostert back. He's active, so I wouldn't be testing out Jalen Wright in my lineup. But left tackle Teron Armstead is doubtful for this game. So maybe Devon Achane is less efficient, but in general, we care more about his passing game value. And on screens, that's a much different story than in the run game. So Teron Armstead doesn't really impact my opinion on the Dolphins. Linebacker Bradley Chubb, however, who I thought might return off of IR, has been ruled out. He's not going to make his debut this season. He's not playing against the Texans' vulnerable offensive line. In Jacksonville, Evan Ingram was placed on IR. The Jags are without their starting tight end, so Brenton Strange will get all of the snaps. I'm not convinced he gets all of the targets, though. There's about 7 available per game for Evan Ingram, and odds are most of them go to Brian Thomas. So Brian Thomas, you would think it's an upgrade, but actually he's going to be going up against Sauce Gardner. Gardner didn't play last week, and he will in Jacksonville. That's very, very important. And maybe Brian Thomas actually gets shut down. We've seen that happen against a corner like Jalen Johnson and the Bears in the past, but otherwise, unless Brian Thomas is injured, he's always money in the bank. So maybe he's really just the best player on the field tomorrow, but Brian Thomas maybe doesn't actually benefit from Evan Ingram going on IR. If anything, I would think Josh Reynolds and Parker Washington probably get the majority of those targets. They did add Josh Reynolds off of waivers after he was cut by the Broncos. And Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, and Gabe Davis are on IR. Josh Reynolds will get some snaps. Just how much do you trust them coming from Mac Jones? It's not ideal. So I'm not going to start Josh Reynolds, but maybe he is actually the guy in DFS instead of Brian Thomas, who goes up against Sauce Gardner. There's only one player in Jacksonville on defense that's out. Otherwise, they're very healthy. They have played decent on defense lately. But for the Jets, they're getting healthier. I mentioned Sauce Gardner will return, but Breece Hall also expected to return. He's questionable with a knee injury. Didn't practice on Wednesday or Thursday, but then on Friday, he was full. So Breece Hall will suit up, expecting to play. He's a game time decision, but I do not expect Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis to be very relevant this week. The matchup's elite. The Jaguars are terrible against running backs, so Breece Hall, I think, is a must start. As long as he plays, I do think you want him in your lineup. Their offensive line, though, is very banged up. Left tackle Tyron Smith has been on IR for over a week now. Right guard Elijah Vera Tucker, he's questionable himself. And right tackle Morgan Moses is questionable as well. So that's not good. But on the defense, I mentioned Gardner is active, but the other cornerbacks opposite him are banged up. DJ Reader, the number 2 corner, is doubtful. And then his backup, Brandon Eccles, on that side of the field is also out. So we're actually going to get a 3rd string cornerback opposite Sauce Gardner. So the Jets have to shadow Brian Thomas, in my opinion. If there's ever a snap where Thomas is not facing Sauce Gardner, I expect them to be throwing a go route on Thomas deep down the field. I expect them to exploit that matchup if they can. I doubt the Jets give them that opportunity unless they're really just tanking. But in the Chargers offense, it looks like Justin Herbert will play. He was limited in practice earlier with an ankle injury, but full later in the week. Herbert will suit up, and that's very good news. But Ladd McConkey still a game time decision, and while he was limited all week in practice with both knee and shoulder injuries, I don't feel confident he plays because they do have a Thursday game against Denver. That division rivalry is a very important game. It could decide playoff seeding more likely than the outcome of this game. And last week, McConkey was limited in practice all week as well. So it's not like he was upgraded to full. It's not different. And it's just a question of pain tolerance if they're willing to risk it. I'm not convinced they will. I think they kind of feel like they can probably beat the Buccaneers without him. So if he wants to play, if he demands it, then maybe he will. But I think odds are they hold him out. They need him on Thursday a lot more than on Sunday. So I did rank McConkey maybe he suits up. I'm a bit more optimistic about it, but I would need a backup plan if I was going to start him or plan to do that in my lineup. It's a 4 p.m. game window, which is usually not ideal, but there are other games to pivot to. There's 8 games in that same 4 o'clock window or later. Odds are you have someone that's playing late enough to start instead. So McConkey, an interesting asset this week, a great matchup, but I'm not convinced he actually plays just because of caution and a game plan that probably favors Thursday's game against the Broncos. But I am interested in Stone Smart a little bit. I didn't rank him. I think that was unwise. With no Will Dissly, and if McConkey doesn't play, then Stone Smart probably gets some targets. He had over 50 yards last week. But then Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnson, I think, are the main beneficiaries, probably like 5-6 plus targets for both of them. And maybe DJ Chark also gets targeted down the field. Jalen Reagor is out as well. But on defense, only linebacker Denzel Perryman is questionable. Otherwise, unless they're on IR, no other player is out for the Chargers defense. The Buccaneers, though, are probably going to be without Bucky Irving. If I had to guess, Bucky will not play. He did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. And while apparently he was limited on Friday, it was not seen by reporters. It was not open to the media, and the degree of which he was limited is unsure. I would say he was very limited, if not didn't practice at all on Friday. So his back injury forced him out last week. We were worried about it, and then he started the game and then burned you if you started him. He barely had more than like 3 touches. Very few snaps in that game last week. So I'd be very concerned that that happens again. Even if Bucky Irving does play, I don't expect him to finish it. So he's a game time decision. They need a pregame warm-up, and I would be very pessimistic about Bucky actually stepping on the field. I would not start him. I would only trust Rachaad White. I think if anything, Sean Tucker might get more goal line touches this week than Bucky Irving. So no thank you. With Irving, I downgraded him significantly in the rankings. But Sterling Shepard is questionable with a foot injury, didn't practice Wednesday, Thursday, limited on Friday, but a game time decision, you're probably not starting him. Only averaging about 40 yards per game the last few weeks. That's not enough to trust. But they do have 3 safeties that are out or on IR. They have another safety that's questionable, so very banged up in the secondary. And then the Bucs also have 2 corners on IR and 2 cornerbacks that are also questionable. So in general, I am upgrading Justin Herbert, knowing that he's healthy, and if Ladd McConkey might play, I think Herbert's a much more interesting start this week against the Bucs. But in New Orleans, Olave, Shaheed, Taysom Hill, and Bub Means, we all knew were on IR already. But Derek Carr is out. Jake Haener will get the start. And while I already knew that, I think I have to reevaluate some of the risk level with Juwan Johnson in that scenario. I don't know if Juwan Johnson is actually that safe with Jake Haener, but he probably sees the most targets. I still think the floor is decent. I would still consider Juwan a good streaming option, but probably in a tier below than where I previously ranked him yesterday. But in Washington, their opponent is without Austin Eckler, not expected to return until as early as week 18. I think Brian Robinson will be a league winner, a must start in the fantasy playoffs. Huge volume expected for Brian Robinson. But Noah Brown, shockingly, was placed on IR. He's out for this game, and that means Terry McLaurin and Zach Ertz will be the key targets. One of the other players will have to step up. But how much do you trust the rookies, Luke McCaffrey or Ben Sennett? I don't. I'm not starting them for sure, but maybe I'd pick them up. If anything, though, the role that Noah Brown would play was more of a deep down the field threat, and maybe De'Ami Brown does get those targets. Maybe De'Ami is actually the play in place of Noah Brown. But I wouldn't be starting any of them. Only Terry and Zach Ertz are safe alongside B-Rob and Jaden Daniels. But on defense, defensive tackle Daron Payne is questionable, and otherwise they're pretty healthy. Marshawn Lattimore will make his debut with the Commanders against his former team in New Orleans. So a revenge game for Lattimore. But in Philly, the Eagles are without Dallas Goedert. He was placed on IR last week, so Calcaterra does get the upgrade. Maybe he finds himself in the end zone once again. But Britton Covey is out. That's kind of irrelevant. Linebacker Bryce Huff is on IR. But Reed Blankenship has been ruled active. The corner will play. In Pittsburgh, George Pickens is out as well. For the second week in a row, I wouldn't be trusting Calvin Austin, Mike Williams, or Van Jefferson, but I do think it benefits Pat Freiermuth a lot, especially in the red zone. I think Freiermuth is a good start at tight end. But offensive tackle Calvin Anderson was placed on IR. They're going to be without him for the rest of the season. And then defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi is out, along with safety Deshaun Elliott out as well. But then the last game on Sunday in Seattle, Kenneth Walker is doubtful. Zach Charbonnet is expected to be the starter, and my rank on him, top 10, does hold. But now they also have 4 out of their 11 offensive linemen on IR. They've been banged up for a while. And then their defense is missing 2 cornerbacks that are out, 2 safeties are out, 1 linebacker and defensive tackle are both on IR. For the Packers, Marshawn Lloyd is still not coming back on the field. That's not good news. But right guard Jordan Morgan was placed on IR over a week ago. Luke Musgrave, the tight end, is also still on IR, so Tucker Kraft remains viable at tight end. And Romeo Doubs is active. He missed last week with a concussion, and maybe Christian Watson is not as safe in that situation. So I'm not starting really any Packers receiver this week. I don't trust them. With the role for Josh Jacobs and Tucker Kraft pretty much on lock in the red zone, I really have a hard time betting on touchdowns in Green Bay at receiver. But cornerback Jair Alexander is out for this one. So JSN and DK Metcalf do get an upgrade, as the nickelback Javon Bullard is also out as well. So I think JSN in the slot really benefits, but DK Metcalf probably torches the backup. I think Metcalf has some upside this week. I think both him and JSN are legit starts on Sunday night. But I still feel worried about Geno Smith in the red zone. I still kind of feel like they favor the running back on the goal line most of the time, and maybe they settle for field goals, given Geno's not that efficient for touchdowns. But in the Vikings-Bears game on Monday, left tackle Christian Darrisaw and linebacker Ivan Pace are on IR for the Vikings. Otherwise, their offense is completely healthy. However, on defense, cornerback Stephon Gilmore is questionable for the second week in a row. I do not expect him to play. He did not practice this week. So Gilmore probably is out. Maybe DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are safer. But in Chicago, Roshan Johnson is out once again with his concussion. So not going to suit up. Travis Homer will be the backup again. But DeAndre Swift is questionable for the second week in a row with a groin injury. Did not practice Thursday or Friday, but then on Saturday he was limited. And just like last week, the last day of practice, with that status, I expect him to play. He wasn't efficient. He was terrible last week, so I'm not dying to start him. It's a very bad matchup against the Vikings, but Swift will get most of the snaps with no Roshan Johnson. Maybe he doesn't get vultured. He at least gets a goal line rush attempt maybe this week. But center Ryan Bates is out, so maybe even less efficient numbers for him as well. And then defensive tackle Jervon Dexter out as well. The Bears are a bit injured. But in Las Vegas, the last game of the week, Aiden O'Connell did not practice this week, except he was limited in the Wednesday walkthrough, and there's a slight chance he is actually active. But I do not expect that to be the case. I am expecting Desmond Ridder to get a revenge game start against the Falcons. So I'm not starting him, but the matchup is really good. Maybe Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers and his rushing stats do actually offer some upside. But no thank you. In the playoffs, I'm not going to start Desmond Ridder. But Jacoby Myers is questionable with an ankle injury, and I do expect him to play. He was limited all week in practice, and he will suit up. I'm not worried about Jacoby Myers this week. But Zamir White is on IR. Alexander Madison is active. He will play this week. But Sincere McCormick has earned the job. He's been declared the starter, averaging over 60 yards per game the last 2 weeks. And McCormick would be the only guy to be interested in this backfield. But the matchup's not great. I'm not dying to do it. On defense, though, Max Crosby was placed on season-ending IR. He will have knee surgery coming up soon. So him and Christian Wilkins both on IR now, and Adam Butler, another defensive lineman, is questionable, not expected to play this week. But cornerbacks Nate Hobbs and Sam Webb also questionable. Maybe Kirk Cousins does exploit it a little bit. But that's it for all the injury updates. The Niners and Rams already played on Thursday. But lastly, I want to mention some weather updates as well. If you missed it, I think I did mention it. In Cleveland, there are going to be 19 mile per hour winds and a 40% chance of rain. The wind is expected to slow down as the game progresses, but it will be peaking at roughly 19, 20 miles per hour. So at 20 is where I get concerned. I remember Jarvis Landry in the past had some really rough games at this point in the season because of the wind himself. So I would be concerned about it, but they have been productive. I'd probably still trust him. It's not over 20 miles per hour, and as long as it stays under 20 miles per hour, I think I'll still start the Browns. But maybe the running backs really do benefit. Maybe Hopkins and Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, Noah Gray don't benefit either. Maybe the quarterbacks do deserve to be diminished. I did bump them down in my rankings, but otherwise, weather's not like a huge factor. The biggest note would be in Tennessee, where there's a 30% chance of rain, but only in like the first and second quarter. It should die down by halftime. That did really slow down the Rams game, though, in San Francisco. There's also 13-mile-per-hour winds. It's not terrible, but it is relevant. But otherwise, no downgrades at all. So those are all the weather updates. And with all of that out of the way, I would like to update some of my win-loss picks. It was kind of controversial on Monday. There was a lot of pushback. And I'm probably not going to change the games you're expecting me to. I'm going to hold strong on the Patriots and Titans in an upset this week. I am kind of desperate, like I'm willing to take these chances. I really do believe those teams will win. But in my opinion, they're go either way games. There's a lot of them this week. And I'm going to stick with those calls because I'm down 11 on y'all overall this season. And if I'm not going to start chucking threes, essentially, then there's no way, if I don't disagree with you, that I can pick up that ground and actually have a chance to win. So there's only 4 weeks left. I need to pick up some ground. I'm down 11. What do you expect? I'm going to make some bolder calls with that in mind. But I am changing 4 of these picks. I'm changing the Jets Jaguars pick. I am now on the side of New York because I didn't expect both Breece Hall and Sauce Gardner to play back on Monday. That's very relevant. The Jags' run defense sucks. It's much better for New York. If Breece Hall gets this matchup, then Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen. So that's huge. I also didn't expect Evan Ingram to miss this game. So with Sauce Gardner potentially locking up Brian Thomas, I have some big concerns for the Jaguars now that I didn't have on Monday. So I'm going to switch the pick. It was a go either way game, in my opinion, in the first place. And now I'm on the side of New York. They have no other winnable games after this point. Let's throw them a bone. Let's give them this one. They don't lose 2 in a row in Florida. Give me the Jets to win. It doesn't feel safe, but given they're healthier, I will go with the Jets. But I'm also going to take the Lions, mainly because of the injuries to Buffalo and their defense. This is a complete toss-up game. It can really go either way, but given the secondary is so injured, I think the home field advantage will be the deciding factor. Maybe Dan Campbell does go for it on 4th down and it completely burns them. That's kind of why I took the Bills in the first place. But with these injuries, despite Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid returning, Josh Allen can do it without them. I don't think that really changes the Bills' offense. The Bills' defense, though, very vulnerable. I trust the Lions' offense. Give me the Lions instead. I don't feel great about it, but I will take the home team. Detroit, still viable for the 1 seed. This game would be huge to lock it up. So I will take Detroit. It's a true toss-up, but give me the Lions because of the Bills' injuries on defense. I'm also going to switch my Chargers pick. I originally went with Tampa, and I was convinced that McConkey wouldn't play on Monday. Now it's at least 50-50. I'm more optimistic it will happen, and I was also a bit worried about Herbert. Now it's for sure Herbert will play. So that's all positive news for the Chargers. I'm also going to this game, and as a Chargers fan, to go into this stadium anticipating defeat, where's the fun in that? So this feels like a very obvious decision. I need to take my team, and I'm going with the Chargers. It would be a terrible omen to actually be rooting for Tampa in that stadium. So I'm going with the Chargers. I'm still not totally convinced McConkey will play, but with Herbert now sure to play, I will take the Chargers. Give me LA at home over Tampa. I'm going to give them that home field advantage they need. But lastly, I'm also going to take the Cowboys. And originally I was taking Carolina, and Vegas likes Carolina. Y'all like Carolina. I don't think that's a good sign at all. Like, this is the first time in over 2 years that the Panthers have been favored by Vegas. They're actually not underdogs in this matchup. And I looked into the record for the Cowboys. While 2 of these wins were with Dak Prescott, they're actually very impressive on the road. The Cowboys are 4-2 on the road, 1-6 at home. Their only victory at home is against the Giants. And if they had beaten the Bengals, which they almost did, that would have been 3 wins in a row. The Cowboys are hungry for wins right now, and I don't want to underestimate their defense. I'm probably going to start them in my lineup this week, and if they do play this well on the road again, I could easily see a win. It's not like the Panthers are that elite. We've just lost so much confidence in Dallas. We're willing to bet against them at this point. So I think all of the signs are actually not safe to trust Carolina. The fact that JC Horn may not play, also not ideal, but he probably does. It's probably not that big of a deal. And with no Trayvon Diggs, maybe I am wrong here. But you guys are on the side of Carolina, and like I mentioned, I need to pick up some wins. I think it's a true toss-up. I'm going to switch to the Cowboys. Fuck it. This one, I don't feel like passionately about it, but I think from a strategic standpoint on like picking up games, we need to disagree, and I don't like the fact that we disagree on this one. If anything, I thought I would be disagreeing with you when I took Carolina. So I will go with the Cowboys. I don't feel great about it, but I'm going to take Dallas on the road. They're a much better team this season than at home. This game is on the road for Dallas. So I'm switching 4 games. I'm taking the Jets to beat the Jaguars. I'm also taking the Lions to beat the Bills, the Chargers to beat the Buccaneers, and the Cowboys to beat the Panthers. You guys did not bully me. It's all about these injury reports. And in the first place, these were toss-up, go either way games. I know you guys disagreed with me, but I'm sticking with Arizona to lose, as well as Cincinnati. I'm sure those are the ones that pissed you off the most. So there's 5 games this week that we disagree on, and the fact that I'm down 11, I'm hoping to go 4-1 in those specific games. But I'm also going to update my picks against the spread. The lines are a bit better, and I also changed my opinion on 2 games that I don't want to bet on anymore. The Ravens are now 16.5 point favorites, so I'm going to stick with the original line, -15. Give me Baltimore to win by blowout. But the Colts is now up to +4.5, and I want to avoid a push. So give me 4.5. I will take that extra half point. I am either right or wrong about this one, but Seattle did diminish down to +2.5, and I got them at +3. I do think they win this game at home. Give me Seattle +3. The 2 injuries to the corners for the Packers, I think, are key, really help out JSN and Metcalf. Give me Seattle +3. And then the Dolphins line maintained at +3 all week long, so give me the Dolphins +3 again. And then now I'm betting on the Chargers to win. So I'm going to remove Tampa. I'm also betting on the Lions to win. I'm also going to remove Buffalo. Those ones were toss-ups in the first place. But despite not believing they win, I do always like Mike Tomlin as a road underdog. It's a very good spot for him. He always really covers the spread in this situation. I do trust their defense a lot. So it's going to be a close game. Give me the Steelers to cover. I still think the Eagles win, but not by blowout. Give me the Pittsburgh Steelers +5.5. I think it's more of a 3-4 point game, and I like getting points with Mike Tomlin. Give me the Steelers as underdogs to cover, but not win. And then the Patriots, I did pick as a straight up underdog to win, and they're getting 6 points. Gimme New England +6. That one feels like a very safe bet in my view. Maybe they lose by a touchdown and I'm wrong, but if it happens, I think it would be more of like an overtime loss, and even that should push at +6. So I like New England a lot this week. I think they will beat Arizona for the 3rd time in a row since the year 2020 without Tom Brady. So those are my picks. Baltimore -15, the Colts +4.5, Seattle +3, Miami +3, Pittsburgh +5.5, and New England +6. There's many other underdogs I like as well. I almost took like Dallas +2.5, the Browns +4, Tennessee +5 is also a nice bet, and they're all very tempting, but these are the 6 I'm going with this week. So those are all of the updates to, my win-loss decisions. And lastly, let's talk about rankings. Where at running back, I did make a few changes. In the top 20, the only real difference would be Breece Hall now entering the conversation at number 16. He moves up 40 spots, and the matchup against Jacksonville is the best in the NFL. The Jags cannot stop running backs at all, and it's definitely a big upgrade for Breece Hall. So despite some of his limitations, his injury status and concerns, I would be starting him just like Jonathan Taylor and James Cook. I think based on name value alone, you can't bench him. I want him in my lineup, but I actually did upgrade Brian Robinson Jr. 2 spots overall. He jumped both Jonathan Taylor and technically Breece Hall, although Breece Hall was not ranked back earlier in the week. But I am extending the floor of the second tier. I think not only is Kyron Williams a very safe must start, I also think these 4 other running backs, Rachaad White, Rico Dowdle, Chuba Hubbard, and Brian Robinson Jr. are all must starts as well. I really trust a touchdown for them all, as well as a ton of production. The volume is going to be crazy for all of them, and I do like them in my lineup. I think they're all must starts. The top 15 are very good plays this week. I think they're all safer than guys like Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, and James Cook, who sometimes do not find the end zone in their offenses because of the situation. So in general, it's really just Brian Robinson, who moves up 2 spots, and Breece Hall, who moves up 40. Otherwise, I did downgrade Isaac Guerendo back on Thursday based on his injury status. I was a bit more concerned at that game time decision and his foot injury. So Guerendo moved down 6 spots. I already told you that. And with Breece Hall coming in, everybody else moves down 1 spot. But I also upgraded Tank Bigsby 1 spot overall. I think he's better than Ramondre Stevenson. This week, I did swap them in the rankings, but I also removed Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen, who were at 29-30 previous to this. And with Breece Hall in the rankings, now Jalen Warren and DeAndre Swift do move up 2 spots themselves. I also took out Roschon Johnson, who was previously outside the top 35, but now he's been ruled out, so I'm not going to start him. And in this flex range tier outside the top 30, as Warren and Swift move up, I also feel more confident in Nick Chubb with the rain and the wind. I think there's definitely going to be like close to 17, 18 plus touches for Chubb, and odds are he does find Pater. I think he will score a touchdown on the Chiefs. That's not a bad bet given the weather in Cleveland. So Nick Chubb, I think, is much safer. I upgraded him 6 spots overall. He is in the flex consideration now, but on the lower end of the spectrum, I'm not dying to start him, but he is a bit safer with the weather. And then Sincere McCormick, also much safer now that it's for sure, it's been confirmed. He is the starter. Madison doesn't worry me that much. So I upgraded McCormick 7 spots overall. And I also think he's in that flex conversation. I would consider him not a bad start. Maybe he gets you like 8 or 9 points this week, a decent floor for McCormick without a touchdown. But outside the flex territory, I still think ETN is worth benching, but mainly because I trust Bigsby a lot more. And then Bucky Irving, I did downgrade 13 spots overall. I do not trust Bucky Irving at all. Even if he does play this week, I don't feel safe that he finishes the game. Last week, he totally burned you, and I think I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to rank Bucky Irving as a safe play. I'm only trusting Rashad White. I would bench Bucky Irving this week for sure. And then I did downgrade Braylon Allen. I wouldn't start him now that Breece Hall is active. And then Sean Tucker does enter the top 50, but I'm not starting him either. With Bucky Irving probably not going to play, Tucker might score a touchdown. I wouldn't bet on it, though. I'd rather trust Braylon Allen at that point. But otherwise, Raheem Mostert enters the top 50. It's not relevant at 45. And so does Trey Benson at 48. But just like Tyjae Spears, this is too low in the rankings. While I do rank them now, I'm not going to start him. So that's it at running back. Now let's talk about wide receiver, where in general, the top 20 is mainly the same, but I did feel more confident in extending the must-start tier. I think it's not just JSN now. I think Addison and Adam Thielen are also must-starts. I really feel confident and safe. They should find the end zone, and the ceiling is so high with them. I do trust them a lot. I think they're both must-starts. I would not be benching Addison or Thielen at all. But first player outside the tier is Ladd McConkey at number 19. If he does play, I would feel very compelled to start him. But because he's a game time decision, because it's not a guarantee, I can't rank him any higher. At number 19, it's a very safe floor. If he does suit up, he's averaging 94 yards per game in his last 4. But with no touchdowns, the ceiling isn't like super high. McConkey, if he does play, I would want to start a top 20 player, but you need to have confirmation before the kickoff in the afternoon time window. So just make sure. I'm not convinced he actually plays, but if he does, he's a top 20 receiver. I downgraded Jerry Jeudy 3 spots, though. He's not in that safe tier anymore. And because of the weather, I am concerned that the pass attempts are very diminished in this matchup. So the wind is a big factor. The rain's going to be present. I'm not worried about the rain as much as I am the wind. So Jeudy does move down the board, but at number 20, given his upside, I'd probably still start him. The wind isn't going to be over 20 miles per hour, and that's the only territory I'm really worried about. Jeudy should still be okay. Given Tillman and Njoku probably don't both play, Jeudy should see double-digit targets. So I'd still start him, but not as safe given the wind. And then with McConkey moving up, everyone else is expected to move down at least 1 spot. But I did downgrade Brian Thomas Jr. 5 spots overall because Sauce Gardner is going to play. I'm worried about Thomas because it's so obvious they're going to funnel targets his direction. Maybe it just overwhelms Sauce Gardner and Thomas is actually that good that it doesn't matter. But Gardner's one of the few downgrades that I actually worry about opposite this player, and that's why I'm lowering my expectation on Thomas. I do not expect a touchdown anymore for Brian Thomas in this situation. So moves down 5 spots. I'd still be starting him, but he's not as safe, not as clear of a must start, but still a very good low-end wide receiver 2, high-end flex play. Brian Thomas has a lot of upside, and at 26, I'd still probably start him. But the only player that really like vaults over him, that doesn't like move above him as he moves down, would be Josh Downs, who I'm more confident in with that Levi Wallace cornerback situation. With no Riley Moss, that number 2, number 3 receiver in Indianapolis will really benefit. Josh Downs in the slot, I think, is a very safe play. I do expect him to play. He's been practicing in full already. And Downs, I think, is a very safe option. A top 25 receiver. I think Richardson will get him the ball a lot. So I would like to be starting Josh Downs. I'd rather go Downs over Brian Thomas. And then given Deonte Banks is injured and just the fact that Zay Flowers has been so productive for the most part this season, I think I ranked him way too low. I had him outside the top 35. Now at number 27, I think I would be starting Flowers. The matchup's not good on paper, but you know this game is a shootout and the upside is way too high. Flowers probably does score touchdowns. So start Zay Flowers. He's just a flex play because of the poor production lately. Only 44 yards per game his last 4, but Flowers at number 27, I would be trying to start. He's too explosive to bench. So not an obvious start, but at 27, I am recommending him. And then while Keenan Allen technically moves down 1 spot, it's actually an upgrade in my opinion. I'm actually moving up Keenan Allen with no Stephon Gilmore. I think he does move up a full tier. I previously had him below Khalil Shakir and Deebo Samuel, and obviously he's going to be better than Deebo Samuel, but I think he's going to be better than Shakir as well because Shakir now has other competition to compete with. I downgraded Shakir 5 spots overall, now wide receiver 30, the bottom of this tier, because Keon Coleman is active and Kincaid might suit up as well. So a lot of shuffling in this tier, but I think I did nail it down as best I could. I also upgraded DK Metcalf into this tier. I trust Metcalf with no Jair Alexander or Javon Bullard. I do trust the targets to hit. Against a 3rd string cornerback, DK Metcalf should have a lot of upside. So he's a safer play. He moves up 4 spots overall. And so in this tier, I all have Ladd McConkey, Josh Downs, Zay Flowers, Keenan Allen, and DK Metcalf jumping the floor of Khalil Shakir. I expect double digits from all of them this week. Brian Thomas, though, a little bit closer to 10 points than 14. Brian Thomas does move down a little bit, so does Jerry Jeudy. But then outside this tier, I did rank him at 26, 5 spots higher on Thursday. I told you to start Deebo Samuel, but I did have him as the first player behind Khalil Shakir. So as Khalil Shakir does get jumped, so does Deebo. And yes, I did tell you to start Deebo, but he does move down in the rankings. So does Calvin Ridley, who gets jumped by 3 players overall. Same projection for Ridley, but some better players in my opinion. I previously had lesser opinion on. And then Jacoby Myers, with his questionable status, not as safe, moves down 5 spots himself. Marvin Harrison also moves down 3 spots, but if you told me Christian Gonzalez does not play, I would upgrade Harrison just below DK Metcalf. I'd rather go Harrison than Khalil Shakir at wide receiver 30, 4 spots higher if there's no Christian Gonzalez. But then Garrett Wilson moves down 1 spot, so does Jaden Reed as they get jumped by Ladd McConkey. And then Malik Neighbors with Tommy DeVito, I think loses some value, moves down 5 spots as well, not as safe at all. I would be trying to bench Malik Neighbors at wide receiver 37. No thank you at this point. And then with Keon Coleman active, I'm going to keep both him and Amari Cooper here at the bottom of this tier. I worry about knowing for sure who gets the touchdown in Buffalo. But then outside of this tier, I did upgrade Elijah Moore 10 spots overall with no Cedric Tillman. I wanted to rank him even higher, but with the weather and the wind, I have some worries with Elijah Moore. Same with DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy, so that's why I think you should be benching all of them. The wind is too concerning to bet against, so that's not good for any of them. If anything, Mahomes and Winston also get a downgrade. We'll get to them in just a sec, but then Tank Dell, I did upgrade 2 spots. I think he's going to be better than Darnell Mooney and Devontae Smith. But Smith stays put as Mooney moves down. So does Christian Watson. Watson is also not as safe now that I know for sure that Romeo Doubs is active. So they're in this low-end top 50 tier. I wouldn't be starting any of these players, but if you're super desperate, I did upgrade Alec Pierce at number 54 now. I wouldn't start him though. And then Rashad Bateman, also just hoping for a house call, does enter the top 60 with no Deontay Johnson. So that's it for the wide receiver position. Now let's talk about quarterback, where in general, the only player that moves up would really be Justin Herbert. I downgraded Patrick Mahomes 4 spots because of the weather. I downgraded Jameis Winston 4 spots as well because of the weather. But Justin Herbert will jump Kyler Murray, Jameis Winston, Patrick Mahomes, and Anthony Richardson, a total of 4 spots. I think Herbert's at the top of this tier. The floor is very safe, especially if McConkey does suit up. If you told me McConkey doesn't play, then I'd rather go Richardson than Herbert. But I trust the floor a lot with Herbert. It's a great matchup against the Buccaneers, and the floor feels safer than it does with Mahomes and Winston, given the wind in Cleveland. So an upgrade to Herbert. He's playing indoors, and now that he's healthy, I do trust him more. But I did add Tommy DeVito. I slotted him in at number 30 where Drew Lock was. You're not starting Tommy DeVito, just in case you were wondering. And then at tight end, I'm definitely worried about David Njoku, but if you told me he plays, I think he only moves down 1 spot. I would downgrade him behind Mark Andrews. I'd rather go with Andrews. And while I do think he's down a full tier, I'd still rather go Njoku than Laporta. There's no Cedric Tillman again, and Njoku has 11 targets per game the last month. If Njoku does play, I think you have to start him, but I would rather go Andrews than Njoku instead. I previously had Njoku above Andrews yesterday. So Njoku maybe doesn't play at all. You have to know for sure if you are planning to start him. You need a backup plan. That is definitely what you need. But if Njoku is available, I would be starting him only at tight end number 6. I wouldn't be able to bench him. The volume's just too high in that offense. The wind is concerning, though. Maybe you should just bench Njoku entirely. I think that volume is just too enticing to not bet on. But outside the top 10, I think Juwan Johnson is a bit riskier than I gave him credit for. So while I'm not bumping him down the rankings, I am elevating the tier above him. I don't think he's in the same safe top 10 bracket as Tucker Kraft, Zach Ertz, and Freiermuth. So Juwan Johnson is still a streamer, but he's still my favorite. I still would rank him at number 11. If you're on the wire, my favorite replacement for Njoku would either be Juwan Johnson or Dalton Schultz this week. If not, look for guys like Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper. And if you're super desperate, maybe Stone Smart or Grant Calcaterra, Brenton Strange outside the top 20. And then at defense, I think with the wind, I upgraded the Browns heavily. The Chiefs are still number 1, but the Browns are now number 8. I had them down at number 16 before, and now I feel a lot more confident that the game plan will be impacted by the weather. So start the Browns for sure. I have them at number 8, and then based on talent, I would not be benching the Chargers or the Steelers unless I had a clear top 6 option instead. I think the Chargers move up 2 spots, so do the Steelers. They're safer in my view than the Seahawks or the Packers. That game could be more likely a shootout than either of the other ones. So just because they've been so productive, I would upgrade the Chargers and the Steelers inside the top 10. I would be starting them this week if I could. But then the Panthers against the Dallas Cowboys, I don't know what I was thinking. I downgraded them 6 spots. They're not anywhere near as safe as I was originally thinking. The Cowboys, if they win, should play well, and the Panthers defense is not safe. So no thank you with the Panthers. Down to number 14. They're still interesting, but nowhere near as viable as before. They moved down 6 spots, and no thank you. But the Titans and Bengals game has some rain as well, so I'm not starting either of those defenses. They're now moving up. The Titans at 21, the Bengals at 22. I did pick the Titans to win. They move up 6 spots in the rankings. So that's going to be it in terms of my rankings updates. Here are the quarterback, tight end, and defense here on the screen. The top 20, probably the only players you would consider in your lineup. And I'll leave it on the screen for another 5 or so seconds. You can pause it if you need it. But now I'm going to show you the flex rankings, where these are the top 40 running backs and wide receivers. And outside of the top 23, I think I'd rather be starting a top 30 running back instead. That's what these lines suggest, the relative confidence and projection I have in these players. I think the best flex plays would be the top 30 receivers, the top 23 running backs overall. Outside that point, it's a bit more nuanced. If you have any questions, let me know down below. I'll be happy to answer them and tell you who I would start personally. But I think if you're still going with the top 32 running back or top 39 receiver, there is still a very legit pathway for success. They're not completely dead in the water. I still have some level of confidence in those flex plays. They're just lower end guys in my opinion, more so floor options than high ceiling guys, because I don't expect touchdowns for them. But that's going to be it for my rankings updates, and that's it for this video. It's been a bit longer, but I think it was all worth it, and hopefully you enjoyed all of those details in the injury report. But my name is Adam Riancho. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I will see you next time. Good luck. I hope you get the win in Week 15. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.